大家好，我叫杜佳妮. Hello everyone, my name is Jenny, and today we're going to be talking about cha or tea. What is tea? Tea is a plant that originated in Yunnan province in China, in this red spot right here. This is important because Yunnan has a mild and humid climate with regular rainfall, which is very conducive to growing tea. The oldest surviving tea tree was found in Yunnan in 1991 and was estimated to be more than 2,700 years old. There are at least 6 different types of tea. Some argue that there's a 7th, but we'll talk about that one a bit later. The first type of tea we'll talk about is liu cha, green tea. The type of green tea you see in the picture is called longjing tea. Bai cha is the second type of tea, white tea. Yellow tea is huang cha. Oolong tea is known as oolong cha, or the more formal term in Chinese is actually qing cha. Qing is a color term in Chinese that doesn't have an exact English equivalent, but it translates as something kind of like green, blue, and gray mixed, like in that area. So you could translate it in English as something like greenish blue, bluish gray, grayish green, one of those combinations. That is qing. And one of the features, unique characteristics about oolong tea is the red rims it has, the red edges on the tea leaves. This is due to a unique step that's only done for oolong tea during the processing. The 5th type of tea is hong cha. It literally means red tea, but in English it's called black tea. Black tea refers to the color of the leaves, whereas hong cha refers to the red color of the liquid. The 6th type is hei cha. Hei is the word for black in Chinese, but we can't call it black tea because black tea is already the English term for hong cha. So instead, we call this dark tea or dark black tea. Now, the 7th, arguably 7th, type of tea is pu'er cha. Pu'er is the name of this place where this tea is grown. It's also in Yunnan province, and it's traditionally considered a type of hei cha, so type of dark tea. But some argue that it should be considered its own type of tea. This is because sometimes pu'er tea can be more expensive than other types of dark tea, and some producers want to make it its own type to increase the value a little bit more. Different types of tea also have different degrees of fermentation. This leads to their different colors. So at the bottom, with the least degree of fermentation, you have green tea, which has no fermentation at all. Next you have white tea, oolong tea, yellow tea, black tea, which is fully fermented. And at the very top you have dark tea, which undergoes something called post-fermentation. This is where it's fermented after the tea leaves have been processed and dried. Teas also have different caffeine contents. At the lowest with the least caffeine content is pu'er cha, and at the highest caffeine content is going to be dark tea. Different types of teas also have different processing. So some have only 2 steps, like bai cha, whereas qing cha has 5 steps. And this shaking green step right here is what gives it those red tinged edges. There are also different forms of tea. One of these forms is dai pao cha, which is tea in tea bags. This is normally reserved for lower quality tea, where you don't really care about seeing the tea leaves, and you don't care about preserving it to keep it in its natural shape that much. You're not really looking at it, so it just goes into a tea bag. The second type form of tea is compressed tea cakes. These come in 2 different types. You have cake tea, tuan cha, which looks something like this, and brick tea, zhuan cha, which is compressed into a brick shape but can still have some nice embellishments on it, some nice imprints. Compressed tea cakes is traditionally you could use it, you can have any type of tea compressed into a tea cake, but now it's mostly just reserved for dark teas, especially pu'er cha. When you use a tea cake, you don't use the whole tea cake to use in your tea. Instead, you pry off a piece of the tea cake using a tool, and then you use that piece. so you don't use the whole thing at once. The most common form of tea is going to be loose leaf tea. And this is because you can appreciate the shape and color of the tea leaves. So for higher quality tea, you'll leave it as loose leaf tea. But if it's not that high quality, it might go into a tea bag. Another type of tea is mo-cha, probably more well known to us in the West as matcha. Matcha is where you grind the leaves into powder and then you whisk that powder into hot water, like what's being done here. It uses a whisk that looks like this, and this is what the ground tea looks like. This was a popular form in the Tang and Song dynasties, not so much anymore. At that time, in the Tang and Song dynasties, they would hold competitions where they would try to see who can make the best looking foam by whisking. And those competitions were called doucha. Now, mo-cha is an integral part of Japanese tea culture, and this video was actually taken in Japan. Tea was first used as a medicine to help clear the mind and energize the body. Tea's homeland is also China, so it has 4,000 to 5,000 years of history, and over that time has become an essential part of daily life. It is considered one of the 7 daily necessities of Chinese people, being one of the things you deal with once you wake up in the morning. In Chinese, that's called 开门七件事. 7 things you have to deal with once you open the door. And those include things like firewood, rice, cooking oil, salt, soybean sauce, vinegar, and tea. Tea is also one of the 8 elegant practices of the ancients, 古人八大雅士, which include things like music, chess, calligraphy, painting, poetry, wine, flowers, and tea. So tea has become a tradition of life and culture, and it reflects different Chinese values. In fact, each type of tea has its own values. So green tea is simple and light. Black tea is reserved and mild, which are traditionally feminine qualities. Oolong tea is warm and persistent, and dark tea symbolizes the wisdom of the elderly. Tea reflects the balance between nature, through the tea leaves, and mankind, through the values that they represent. Tea overall is also seen as quiet and reserved, whereas alcohol is not. These are some tea vending machines in Taiwan, and here you can find the character for tea on these vending machines. Can you spot those? There are 2. One right here, and one right here. Heisong is the brand of the vending machine and the drink right here. Cha means tea by itself. Hua, also here. He cha hua. Hua means flower. So tea flower is actually the name for camellia. Camellia. I think I'm saying that right. So tea flower is the name of a flower, but cha by itself just means tea. Tea is also a very important part of Chan Buddhism, or the Japanese term is Zen Buddhism. Tea has a deep historical and philosophical connection with this Buddhism, and it represents simplicity, mindfulness, and the spirit of meditation, which are all very important qualities in Chan Buddhism. Tea serves as a meditation aid. This is because tea has some caffeine content, so it can be used during the long meditation rituals to help keep monks awake. The very intricate process of a tea ceremony can also be used as a form of moving meditation. Tea symbolizes simplicity and naturalness, which are values that are valued in Chan Buddhism, and it also serves as a symbol of enlightenment. Finally, tea can transmit Chan ideas to other nations, especially to Japan, which is where we have Zen Buddhism. So Chan Buddhism came over to Japan through tea, and this is a Buddhist temple. Why should you drink tea? First, it's customizable. You can adjust it according to what you need and what you want. You can drink the same thing every day, or you could change it up every day. You can adjust the caffeine level. You can drink tea alone, or you can drink it with others, like in a tea house. And some types of tea don't actually even contain any tea leaves. You can have herbal teas or floral teas like mint, or chamomile, or jasmine flower, or taohua. Secondly, it serves as a form of meditation. So, like a Buddhist monk, you can also use tea to help you slow down and relax. Third, it appeals to all ages and it's accessible to all different ages. It's not just for one age group, and you might have certain types of tea more popular with one age group and other types of tea popular with other age groups. Fourth is that it's full of health benefits. Depending on the type of tea you drink, it's full of vitamins. It can help prevent cancer or obesity, reduces risk of stroke, cardiovascular disease, and can be good for diabetics. Also, tea is not just for drinking. It can be leaves can be used in toothpaste, in shampoo, in ointment, so its function is not just consuming. It has a lot of benefits. Now, today, tea is one of the most widely consumed drinks in the world. It was introduced to the West by Portuguese and Dutch traders in the 16th century. And this is a coin with the Dutch East India Company emblem, which is one of the companies that brought tea from China to the West. United Nations designated May 21st as International Tea Day. Different countries might have their own tea day, but this is the international one. Japan also has a very rich culture involved with tea. It has its own distinct tea ceremony culture that's different from China's, and it's known worldwide for its matcha, mocha. In Japan, you might be able to get matcha flavored cakes like this one, or ice cream like in the video that we saw, or just matcha by itself. Great Britain also has its own distinct tea culture. Tea became a luxury item for the British aristocrats by the late 17th century. Simply put, there was a trade imbalance where the British were buying all this tea from China, but China wasn't buying anything from Britain, so all of the silver was flowing into China. That trade imbalance eventually led to the First Opium War that lasted from 1839 to 1842. The Britons focused more on tea variety and taste rather than purity and quality like the Chinese do. So they would like to add sugar and milk, fruit, flowers, or even spice to their tea rather than just drinking it by itself. They would also have tea with light food like sandwiches, scones, cookies, and fruit tarts. Their International Tea Day is April 21st. This map shows how tea spread through this part of the world. You can see there are two different ways that it spread. One, in the red, is by land. The one in blue is by sea. If tea spread or arrived at that country by land, it will have a name in that language close to cha, close to the word for cha. So in India, it's known as chai, right? If tea arrived to that country by sea, it will have a word closer to tea, like English. We cannot talk about tea without talking about nai cha, milk tea. Milk tea was popular in Japan during the 20th century due to Hong Kong-style milk tea. The Dutch colonization of Taiwan in the 1600s also introduced that European method of adding milk and sugar into their tea rather than just drinking it by itself. Jinju nai cha, bubble tea, was invented in Taiwan in the 1980s. So you have milk tea, and then what makes it bubble tea is adding these tapioca pearls right here. The basic ingredients for Jinju nai cha are the tea base, milk, and the pearls made of tapioca starch and sugar that you saw on the previous slide. But you can also add additional things into it like tropical fruits, red bean, aloe, grass jelly, taro, cheese foam, popping boba like this, and sago like this. So your milk tea could look something very simple like this one to something more complicated with a lot of additions like this one. If you'd like to try milk tea for yourself, there are certain tea shops in Milwaukee that you can try, close by UW Milwaukee, or there are also tea shops in Chicago's Chinatown. If you want to get the best Jinju nai cha that looks more like this, I would recommend Tiger Sugar in Chicago's Chinatown. Or if you'd like to order tea in a restaurant, this is how you can do that. The server might ask you, 你想喝点什么? 你想喝点什么? What would you like to drink? And you can respond, 我想喝奶茶, or 我想喝茶, or 我想喝绿茶, 我想喝红茶, depending on what you want to drink. That is it for this video. Thank you for listening. 再见.